the events over August with the different SEO and Modi's comments around that. But then soon after that, Trump and Modi were having exchanges, and there was a sense of that, okay, there was a lot of fanfare around SEO, and Modi was sort of snubbing Trump with the limousine photo of Putin and stuff. But like, at the end of the day, these two still were getting on with the actual nitty-gritty of economics and deal doing. So is it really the case that the Indo-US relationship is bad, or is it being hyped up for narrative and political purposes on either side?
Optically, it's terrible. In reality, it's not bad, it's bruised. But this is a question of, can whatever bleeding has started be stopped? Can the wound be healed? Are both sides willing to embrace each other the way they once did? This is not about the US and another small economy trying to walk back their tensions.
This is The Global Gambit.
Today, my guest is Abishur Prakash, the founder of the Geopolitical business strategic advisory firm in Toronto, Canada, and someone who provides much of a great geopolitical analysis through Mr. Geopolitics on foresight and a sort of 360-degree view of today and tomorrow. Sounds like quite the person who, well, given that we talk about India, America, great power competition, economic statecraft, a fair amount on this channel, if not all the time, well, he's just the man for the job. And what I wanted to talk to him about exactly today, because whilst we've got the war in Ukraine, we've got seemingly at the time of recording a fundamentally important peace deal between Israel and Gaza, the macroeconomics are always going on, and there are some worrying signs about whether or not the US is still on the verge of recession. And this all is because, or partially because, of Trump's tariffs, which have also impacted India's economy significantly, to the point where a couple of months ago, as I reported on this channel, Modi and President Xi of China looked quite chummy. But some of you watching were quick to point out that India always likes to try and be on good terms with everybody, or its strategic autonomy. With that rather long-winded introduction aside, I'm sure it's delightful to have you on. I think when we begin these sorts of conversations, I like to just get a sense of what exactly are you looking at right now? How are you feeling about the US-Indo relationship and everything that's been happening over the summer?
There is so much happening in the world, Pyotr. So much unfamiliarity, so much unpredictability. The geopolitical stage, it used to be defined by one big event every generation. And now there's more taking place in a single day or week than most can keep up with. And we're not talking about small events, small disruptions. We're talking about major shocks to how the world works, how alliances function, how trade patterns function, the general architecture of the world. And alongside US, China, alongside what's happening between the West and NATO, another massive transformation is taking place between the US and India. We're talking about the world's two largest democracies, but ideology aside, we're talking about two countries that for 30 years have eyed each other as their main partner for the future. For 30 years, across administrations, starting in the Clinton administration, America has sought to make the US-India relationship its most strategic partnership in the 21st century. And for 30 years, India has sought to move beyond the Cold War and the tensions between India and the US at that time, and use America to rise up in the world. And all of that has fallen apart in a matter of weeks, where Trump's tariffs on India, the US posturing towards Pakistan, the US threats that the situation towards India could get worse beyond tariffs, have changed the status quo. These are two nations that are now viewing each other less as the ultimate partner and more as some kind of a transactional love-hate relationship, very much like a situationship. And the future of these two nations now in this relationship is up in the air.
It certainly is, though, as I think we've read in more Western outlets. I know some of my audience are very pro-Modi or more anti the West, or West skeptical or critical, at least, of Western hypocrisy. You know, there were some outlets that were saying that even with the ill treatment of the Trump administration on India through the tariffs, you know, India is still going to try to placate the Trump administration because of the importance of trade and US investment and things like that. Would you agree with that? Or you do think that India is less and less, or Modi particularly is less and less willing to put up with Trump's erraticism and sort of mistreatment?
Well, look, I don't think that India and America are going to divorce, that this is the end of the relationship. Economic ties are going to go in decline. But I think two things are happening simultaneously. Number one, both sides are clear that they cannot rely on each other long term. So this is a structural change from foreign investment, from economic flows, most importantly to security, specifically to do with China in the case of America's Indo-Pacific strategy. That's now completely sidelined. Second is that India needs, in the short term, to keep the doors open. Economic and social development are the most important priorities for the Indian government. That's why India has done its non alignment, its neutrality geopolitics to shake hands with everybody. But even that is now coming to an end because even the trade deals that are being signed today, economic agreements that are being signed today, defense agreements that are being signed today, the design of these agreements is no longer about remaining open and accessible, about nations working together. They're increasingly about picking sides. If you look, a short sidebar, for example, just taking a look at the US China friction and how the pressure that America is exerting, say on Europe, to buy American steel, to put tariffs on Chinese steel, or the deal that America signed with Vietnam, where Chinese trade that flows through Vietnam now has a 40% trans-shipping tariff. And those are examples of where these new deals are heading. And that same model now applies to the US and India. So there are now real limits as to how far these two economies can go. Will this simply be about Amazon and Netflix expanding into the Indian market as they already have? But the big ticket deals, the big ticket agreements will now increasingly be out of reach. That remains unknown at this point. India will try its best to dance with America, to find ways to work with America. But remember that this is not India of 1960s or the 1970s that's just emerging out of independence, that still has a long way to go. We're talking about one of the world's largest economies, arguably the fastest growing major economy in the world today, and a country that's thinking very differently. Biggest signal of that, there was a war between India and Pakistan earlier this year, and India did in Pakistan what it hadn't done since 1999, which is strike Pakistan directly. That's all a sign of a new Indian geopolitics emerging.
Yes, I would certainly agree to an extent, but to be devil's advocate on this point, if India is going to, I don't know, reduce its engagement with the United States, where is it going to go? Is it going to focus more on south to south trade, right? So with Mexico, with Vietnam, because it's pretty clear from other people's perspectives, or people argue, that India's not going to get closer with China in a sort of way that it does in an economic sense, purely in an economic sense, not ideologically, with China. Obviously, they have a very good relationship with Russia, but Russia's economy doesn't have the same breadth or depth or for trade with India as the US does. So how is India going to replace what it maybe gives up? Or you're not saying that with the US?
I wouldn't say replace, I would say reduce. And I wouldn't say that India is going to align with China, but India is definitely going to move closer to China, not in ways that jeopardize its economic sovereignty or its national security. Although in the past 48 hours, there are reports that India is now instructing its companies to start buying Russian energy in Chinese yuan. That is a massive shift, considering after the Ukraine war began in 2022, India has continued to trade with Russia. And one of the directives from Delhi to its companies was that Indian firms should not use the Chinese yuan to buy Russian imports. They should use the Emirati dirham. Now you fast forward 3 years, and after Modi visited China, after Modi has shaken hands and done all of the optics, this is one of the first changes. In tandem, India and China have restarted direct flights. So now there's a restart in the movement of goods and people between India and China. Now, are these massive economic deals that are going to change the trajectory of the Indian economy? Absolutely not. Can India cut its reliance, or does India want to cut its reliance on America from wherever it is today to zero? Definitely not. But India is not going to stay quiet and bite its tongue as America threatens the country, as America moves closer to Pakistan. India is not going to put its economy first and its geopolitics second. India is going to try and play both. Will it succeed? Time remains. We'll see what happens. But this is not a story that is only long term, it's short term and long term. In the short term, India is making very quick tactical changes to bolster its economic power, to bolster its economic security. Something as simple as halting rare earth exports to Japan. That happened earlier this year after China started to squeeze the global economy. So India is doing things it hasn't done before. If you expand that long term, it means a different direction for India.
Yeah, I certainly think India is trying to diversify. But you mentioned one thing which sort of caught my attention, which is as America draws closer to Pakistan, I'm not sure where I've seen that happening. I mean, Trump's made it pretty clear what he thinks about the military leadership of Pakistan, and unless he's doing it as a way to try to sort of get them less dependent on China. But could you expand on that? Because frankly, I don't see that happening.
So this goes back to what I said at the beginning, that for 30 years, America and India have been viewing each other as their most significant partners. And in the context of that, both DC and Delhi have changed their relationships with other countries. During the Cold War, US Pakistan relationship was very strong. Now, for the past 30 years, it's been the US India relationship that's taken the spotlight. But in the past couple of months, the US has hosted Pakistani leadership. The US is exploring crypto deals, rare earth deals in Pakistan. This is a fundamental shift in American geostrategy, and it comes at the same time as US India relations are effectively disrupted, sidelining, falling apart, however one wants to phrase it. It comes at that time. That's no coincidence that the US is reaching out to Pakistan, is exploring new setups as its relationship with India enters this unknown waters. So, and the biggest sign of the US Pakistan relationship reaching a new level is that the American vocabulary has started to change. For at least 20 years, America has talked about its relationship with India separate to its relationship with Pakistan. Now, America is talking about India Pakistan in one sentence. And this has irked a lot of officials in Delhi because they don't want to be put in the same bracket as their chief adversary. This isn't optics, this isn't surface level. This is the signs that American geostrategy is starting to change.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that they've signed this AMI 120 missiles and the F-16s. What was it, just yesterday or a couple of days ago? It's certainly an interesting move by the Trump administration. But I think a lot of this, and I'm curious for your thoughts on this, how much of this is just Trump's egoism in the middle of it? Obviously, he claims he brokered the peace deal, ceasefire, whatever, between the two in May, and now he's going to be claiming about Gaza. All of this in the pursuit of this peace prize. So, what's your emphasis there of Trump's personal role?
Question to me is whether Trump's moves today, and remember, we still have 3 years to go of his second term, whether Trump's moves today can be reversed in the future, whether it's by Trump next year, in his last year, or by the next administration. This is not about a slip up at a press conference between Modi and Trump. This is not about the US unveiling more aid for Pakistan. This is about defense. This is about economy. This is about alliances. It doesn't get any bigger than that in geopolitics. So even if, and this goes again to the fact that the geopolitics today is very different. That even if Trump wants to play this dance where on Monday he raises, on Tuesday he's opening up with love, on Wednesday it's back to fighting, on Thursday it's up in the air, and Friday everybody's running around because nobody knows what's going to happen next. Even if that's what Trump wants to do, what will the Indian side do? Stability and certainty is not just the need of investors, it's the need of governments too. Every government needs to have that kind of long term assurance, long term certainty as it's cutting all kinds of deals around the world. And no other economy is more important to cut a deal with than the US. So, will Trump be able to walk back the damage that's already been done to the US India relationship? Or will this turn out to be, as I said, a relationship defined by transactions, by short term thinking, and very much embracing one day, enraging the next day?
But how much do you think that this is really damage done? I mean, as I said, we had the events over August with the different the SEO and Modi's comments around that. But then soon after that, Trump and Modi were having exchanges, and there was a sense of that. Okay, there was a lot of fanfare around SEO, and Modi was sort of snubbing Trump with the limousine photo of Putin and stuff. But like at the end of the day, these two still were getting on with the actual nitty gritty of economics and deal doing. So is it really the case that the Indo-US relationship is bad, or is it being hyped up for narrative and political purposes on either side?
Optically, it's terrible. In reality, it's not bad, it's bruised. But this is a question of, can whatever bleeding has started be stopped? Can the wound be healed? Are both sides willing to embrace each other the way they once did? This is not about the US and another small economy trying to walk back their tensions. This is about one of the key geopolitical players of today and tomorrow. There's only a handful of major shot callers in the world. India is one of them. India's power is only rising, and many of America's bets vis-a-vis China depend on India. Look at Quad, for example, the bloc, where Trump has said he might not attend the Quad summit in India this year. Look at BRICS, which India now is effectively steering because the leaders of Russia and China didn't show up at the Brazil summit earlier this year. The next BRICS summit will be hosted in India. So Modi is now defining the future of BRICS, and Trump is not a big fan of BRICS. So there are more differences emerging between the US and India than there are similarities and overlaps. Yes, India needs foreign investment. India is in many ways in a foreign investment crisis, as net foreign investment earlier this year in 1 month, it dropped to $35 million, which is a shocking number. So India needs capital into the economy that's going to hold US India relations together. But as I said, is that now the new ceiling, or will these nations ever return to where they were before, which is, you are my all. You are my all. You are the country that I'm going to bet on to help me succeed, to help me call the shots. I don't think that atmosphere exists anymore.
Interesting. I mean, in IR, as we've often covered on the channel and with conversations, you've got push and pull factors. And I think this has never been more clearly illustrated through the US attempts to sort of pull India on side, but it's more been China pushing India away and India trying to sort of get on a good terms with America, but without it being seen as an alliance, an ally, more just that strategic partnership, that autonomy being very clearly kept. So with that in mind, what do you think could happen in the next, quarter? Because we've got a lot happening with Trump's efforts on Israel, Gaza. That's going to obviously be seen as a positive step by different nation states and governments. Modi's been obviously very openly supportive of Israel's cause versus the Palestinian, which has surprised a lot of other countries or differs to a lot of other countries. So I'm just wondering how you think exogenous factors, not just Gaza, but anything, could affect the relationship. One last point. Obviously, Modi very publicly wishing Vladimir Putin happy birthday yesterday on Twitter, which, I don't think is going to be exactly delighted by Trump because he's not happy that Putin snubbed him. So very curious about your thoughts on those different areas.
That's a very important point regarding India-Russia. This is a historic relationship. In India, people view that as an alliance. People view Russia as India's best friend in the world. That's the social outlook on the ground. Now, in the context of US-India friction, India has reportedly halted purchases of American defense equipment. That's a massive move. And in the same swing, India is exploring buying the Su-57s from Russia, which is Russia's most advanced fighter jet, because Russia is offering to make them in India. So on the back of the US-India friction, US-Russia relations are reaching new highs. Just another example of how high they could go. By 2030, Russia needs 11 million new people to join the workforce. 11 million new people. The country faces a massive demographic crisis. Now, what country is Russia turning to acquire talent, to acquire human labor? India. So that's a new corridor that's forming in Eurasia between India and Russia that's only going to strengthen India-Russia relations. And that's only going to irk the current White House even more. Now, where will this current US-India friction fighting lead to in this quarter and beyond? Well, there's one of two paths. The first path is that the US does some kind of U-turn in the coming months. As I said, this is not a relationship that's over, that's bad, that's being in free fall. It is bruised, it is bleeding. Now, can Trump turn it around? Can that happen where at the G20, which Trump is not attending, most likely Vice President Vance will be, can there be some kind of outreach there between Indian and US delegations? Over the next quarter or two, Trump may decide that now that various wars have been ended, now that the need of the hour is to stop inflation from rising, create jobs in America, bolster investor confidence. Side note to that, which is a fascinating report, that 100 in capital has now shifted to Asia as investors hedge against the US. $100 billion because investors are now hedging against the US. So if that's now the economic climate that Trump has to navigate, the relationship with India could become even more important. That's the first path. The second path is that India is not a strategic priority in the current administration's agenda the way it was in previous administrations, that US-India relations are not as important as US-China relations, as redefining the transatlantic relationship, as bolstering America's presence in the Middle East, as signing new economic corridor agreements in Africa. In comparison to those things, India may not be as significant for the US administration. And if that is the case, then we could see more fireworks, more distance. And even if fireworks don't happen, even if Trump and Modi keep their differences private, it's the steps that either side could make because they don't view each other with the same significance anymore. So we really have to see. Time will tell. As annoying as that is in geopolitics, we will have to wait and see what happens next.
We certainly will. And it's, constantly in a state of flux. As I like to say on the channel these days, we're in an international just disorder, right? A perpetual state of crises. I think it's rather pointless saying new crisis. We're just embedded
Absolutely.
in a crisis, which are all interlinked given the rate of things.